This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, April 30th, 2021, and my guest is the awesome GadgetsBoy. Hi, Tomi. How are you?
Yeah, good. Can't complain. Things are picking up slowly. Still kind of busy, but yeah, it's getting back to normal. Some sort of normal. Slowly.
Nice. So, the Samsung event. Let's start with that. Because, frankly, I'm a little bummed by what was going on there.
Right.
It seems a little, I don't know. I was expecting a phone. Were you expecting a phone?
I mean, initially I was when the rumors started circulating about a new event coming out. But then when I looked at the leaks about the timeline about what they're going to be announcing and stuff, I realized that it's not going to be phones; it's going to be laptops. So at that point, I was less disappointed.
Yeah, sadly, Samsung does not include me in any of their briefings under embargo in the US.
Right.
So I didn't know what to expect, right? I was basically in for whatever surprise they were going to make at the event. So in my mind, I kind of had set myself on having, some sort of folding phone. So I guess I was a little disappointed. I don't want to say that because those laptops are pretty cool, right?
Yeah, the laptops are pretty cool. I think when it comes to laptop design, and in that sense, Samsung are very good at creating good-looking laptops. And when they put their AMOLED displays on them, it just makes it even much more attractive. I think where I was disappointed is when it comes to the actual specs that's underneath the actual slim body laptops that they announced. That's where I was a bit disappointed. And I think I tweeted that it was pricey. And I got met with a lot of a couple.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, a couple of people were like, "That's not pricey for what it is." And I was just like, "Well, it depends who you're asking." I think for me, if I was to go on some of the UK pricing, for example, is slightly bit more. So they didn't get that for one. And then secondly, if I went on some of the retailers' website here, I can get something that's slightly better for about the same price. So in my head, all you're paying for is the slim portable laptop. Nothing more.
I mean, they're very light. They're surprisingly light, right? That's the thing
Absolutely.
that blew my mind the most. Yeah.
Yeah. They're very, very slim and light.
So, I mean, do you think that, also price-wise, you think that they're kind of trying to aim for the MacBook Air here? Is this like they're trying, very Samsung, right? They're very much competing with Apple.
Competitive, yeah.
Now they're going beyond the phone into the laptop. Do you feel that's what happens here?
I don't even think they're thinking that. Their marketing might be. The marketing department might be thinking, well, we need to be competing in that space, but I don't think that's what they're doing it. I just think it's Samsung. It's time to release something. So what can we release?
It's interesting, too, that they had an entire Unpacked event just for laptops. I don't think that's ever happened before.
I don't remember it. I don't remember that happening. It's usually part of something else. Because I remember vividly actually in Berlin for IFA where they released laptops, phones, and stuff like that. So it was never, to my recollection, it was never just a laptop show.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had laptops announced at Unpacked before, but as part of something else,
As part of
right?
something else, that's right. Yeah, that's as far as I can recollect it. That's right. But yeah, I think they're really good for the people that I can imagine they're aimed at. It's a bit, well, actually, the demographic that they're aiming at is quite confusing for me because I'm thinking, is it for the work people? So if you want to work on the go, or is it for the creators? Because if it's for the creators, then it's not powerful enough, essentially, to do some of the stuff that we do. You might be able to run Photoshop and Premiere, but you won't be able to edit Premiere, like 4K videos in Premiere. You won't be able to do that comfortably for XE graphics card that's in there. So I'm a bit confused. I don't know. Who's it aimed at? That's my question.
I mean, I think, first of all, let's talk. There's basically four, right? Well, four main devices.
Yeah.
There's the Galaxy Book, like the kind of the cheaper one.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the gaming laptop, right?
Yeah.
Which is, what is it called?
Odyssey? Is Odyssey? Is that
That's
one?
That's right,
yeah.
Odyssey.
Odyssey, that's one.
And then there is the Galaxy Book Pro, which comes in two flavors, a laptop and a convertible, right?
Right.
And then those two, the laptop and convertible Pro, come in two sizes, right?
Yeah.
Is it 13 and 15? Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. So they're all priced slightly differently. And to me, I got the feeling that the Pros were not really competing with the MacBook Pro so much as competing with the MacBook Air.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but spec-wise, that's what it feels like to me, especially when we know what the M1 chip can do, right?
Exactly. One could even say it's competing with the new iPad Pro with the M1 chip.
Right, exactly. And then where do you put the base model, like the Galaxy Book then? Is that just kind of like an even cheaper tier in your mind? Because there's nothing that Apple makes that's that low end, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Does that have an AMOLED? No, it's only the Pro, right?
The Pro has AMOLED. I'm looking at the specs right now.
Yeah, me too. I need to catch up.
Because we look at so much products and specs and stuff, so it's easy to mix them up. But yeah, the Pro has a AMOLED display, and the X360 does as well, because that's just a slight variance in terms of spec. Standard Galaxy Book that doesn't have AMOLED. Doesn't have one yet. No. It's very, very basic.
I didn't think it would at that price point.
Yeah, it's 1080p resolution.
It's pretty affordable, actually.
It is.
Yeah, it's a TFT, so I guess.
TFT money to it.
I thought I read somewhere it was $800.
So the cheapest one that they do is 679 euros. On Samsung.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, on Samsung website, and that's with the i3 256 gigabytes and 8 gig of RAM, internal graphics. And it goes all the way to the Intel Iris Xe graphics with 1,149 euros with LTE. You've also got the i7 processor, which I'm assuming the i7 one would be one that people that want to do a bit more would get.
Yeah. Also interesting, did you see that the Pro has 5G as an option?
Yes, I saw that as well.
Which I think is cool. I don't think there are too many laptops with 5G right now. Lenovo makes one.
Yeah, I think Lenovo's heavily invested in that because they've been, I believe they were working with Qualcomm to get their 5G chipset, the mobile processors in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're a creative person like us and you want something with a little more horsepower and you are looking at getting a Galaxy Book of some kind, I think the Odyssey is the one you're looking at.
Absolutely, yeah. You'd get that one.
Right.
And then my other thought process during the whole thing was with the pandemic and stuff, and no one's really traveling and mobile as we used to be. It's interesting that they're still heavily invested in creating these laptops.
Yeah, well, I
with
think
5G as well.
I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't want to get into the Apple earnings because it's not really a topic that my audience is super excited about. I mean, this has been earnings week anyway. Lots of interesting earnings but it's noticeable that Apple significantly increased their revenue on Macs this past, quarter.
Exactly, yeah.
And that tells me that there's a bigger demand for laptops. And I think a lot of that is driven by the pandemic, but I also feel that people are rediscovering, what it means to work on a computer rather than a tablet or a phone, right?
Yeah. But what one could then say that with Apple though, their MacBooks, they're powerful enough to be your desktop once you connect it to external monitors.
True. Yes.
So I'm not reading too much into that for Apple. It's others that I'd be like, well, are people going to invest in this new Samsung Galaxy Books when they're staying at home? But then again, that's me thinking from a creator's perspective. But for your office worker, any of these laptops that they announced would suffice. They would,
for sure,
they would run Microsoft Word completely comfortably on them. So that's not an issue. But when you start thinking of us who are editing videos, that's when you start to think, well, would I ever buy one of these? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, the starting price, it looks like for the Pro is $999, which is right in line with the starting price of the MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And we've already established that the M1 MacBook Air would eat this thing's lunch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No matter how you spec it. Now, it wouldn't have 5G and it wouldn't have an AMOLED and it wouldn't be as light and it wouldn't be as thin. And that's about it, right? I'm not trying to be dismissive of what Samsung's achieved here because one of them weighs like 800 grams or something. Like, it's ridiculously light.
Yeah, they are super light. I've got a Samsung laptop somewhere in my house. I can't remember the exact version. I did a video on it, and I remember taking it out of the packaging, and I was just like, I actually thought there was nothing in the box until I took it out, and I was super surprised how light those things are.
So I'm impressed with that, and I'm always up for a good AMOLED panel.
Same.
And I'm always up for 5G. I mean, it's a given that eventually we want laptops with 5G, so happy with that.
Yeah. I think
at the same time, I just don't think Intel is cutting it in that performance to power consumption ratio, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And they seem to be doing too much to try and to convince people as well that they actually are. But instead of concentrating on that and running marketing ads, they need to concentrate on actually making those products that people want to buy that sells itself. That's the way that I see it. And I want 5G on a laptop, but that's pre-pandemic. But right now,
now you don't need it.
That's the last thing on my mind. I'd rather use my Wi-Fi at home and stuff. If things do go back to normal, that when we can travel and stuff, then yeah, maybe that will become very useful. But again, a lot of businesses now have their staffs working from home, especially in the UK anyway. So again, I don't know what the future is for 5G on laptops here.
Yeah, I would say that for you and I, who are kind of power users, having 5G on our phones is pretty much needed now.
Yes.
We want a phone with 5G because we change phones often enough.
Absolutely.
But I think that if you are, even me right now, I don't think I could justify 5G on a laptop, even if I was traveling, because I can always tether my phone, right?
Exactly. And
so it's not critical.
No. And I also think it's one of those things where once Apple do it, that's when it'll become a thing. I know it's sad to say, but until they do it, it's...
It's interesting you bring that up, because on last week's show, we talked about the M1 iPad Pro and, of course, all the other Apple announcements. And, my guest was Anshel, and we were talking about this, how here we now have an iPad with an M1 chip with 5G, right?
Right.
Like, nothing is preventing Apple from putting 5G radios in their MacBooks. And yet, that it's like, just like the touchscreen, they just don't want to do it, right? Like, it's just, they really are creating this artificial rift. Yeah.
I agree.
It's interesting.
I agree.
But, oh well. I mean, look, I think this is interesting. I mean, I would have loved to be talking about a folding phone with you today. Even if it hadn't been the Z Fold 3, even the Z Flip 2 would have been a very interesting topic.
Yeah. But
I think that we got to give Samsung some props for making some very sexy looking, at least the Pro series laptops. And I think it's interesting. Have they ever made a gaming laptop before?
No.
I mean, I don't follow laptops enough to know. Somebody maybe in Twitter can correct us, but
yeah, I don't think they have, but they've made gaming monitors. And
right.
Yeah. So, and they make a lot of components that you can put in your gaming PCs, like your storage drives, like NVMe SSDs and stuff like that. They do that kind of stuff, but I don't recollect them making gaming laptops.
But that's interesting though, because it means that if you are a big Samsung fan person and you want to get yourself a creator type laptop, you can now buy this.
Yes.
It can't underperform. I'm sure that thing is pretty good for editing video in Premiere.
Yeah, it did well, depending on which one you go for.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I mean, overall, do you have any other takeaways about this event? Like, I didn't even watch it, to be honest with you. It was too early in the morning for me, and I had a bunch of other things to deal with that day. So I kind of like waited for the news to roll in, basically.
Yeah.
But did you watch it at all?
I watched a little bit of it. It was very glossy, as always, typical Samsung. But I think the takeaway from it is just that it's just a filler at the moment to keep us interested until the actual bits that we're interested in. But whenever there's an event, I always just scan through Twitter to see what the kind of buzz it gets, and there wasn't a lot of buzz. It was just mainly in our community. Just it's announced, that was it. There wasn't much discussion going. There weren't that many discussions going on. The way Apple's M1 iPad Pro generated a lot of discussions around what's coming, or even AirTags. So
yeah, it's funny because as I did not get briefed, I did not know what to expect, and then I looked at the news and I saw these Samsung laptops being, clearly an embargo had lifted. And I'm like, that's interesting that they would an embargo for their laptops before the big event happens. And in my head, I hadn't actually done the math that the event had already happened. Like,
right.
I thought, because I had confused the time zones, I thought I was going to be able to watch it still, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, look, it hasn't happened yet. Maybe I was wrong about the time. So I started watching, right? And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's the laptops they just talked about. Oh, right, that's the event. That's why I'm not seeing any buzz, because you're right, I did not see much buzz at all.
No.
I mean, people didn't really care, did they?
I don't know what it was, because like even here, I think only a few people had the hands-on briefing with them. I didn't. So when I went on YouTube, there was only like few videos that were on there compared to, say, when the AirTags got sent out, my feed, my subscription box was flooded.
Had AirTags.
Yeah. So I think I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but yeah, here we are.
Do they usually invite you to their briefings and pre-briefs and stuff?
Yeah, for mobile phones.
For phones.
For mobile, like tablets and mobile phones. Because I've never really covered laptops as big as your tech chat would cover laptops, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So you reviewed a laptop as well recently, the Huawei MateBook X Pro 2021 edition.
Yeah.
I think I have the 2018 model.
Right.
I have the second gen one, whichever, they did one. I think it was 17. They did another one in 18 or 19. I can't remember.
I can't remember the timeline.
Okay, let's be methodical about this. P40 Pro came out in 2020 during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
P30 Pro came out in 2019.
Right.
And I think it's the one that was released earlier that year that I have. So it's the 19 edition.
Gotcha. Is that one, did you pick that one up at MWC?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
they
so
gave it to me
that's
at
correct.
MWC.
That's correct then, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the one I have still. And I love that laptop. I cannot lie. I mean, if I have to go to a Windows laptop, that is my go-to. Even still now, 2 years later. So you played with the latest one. How different is it? Is it just more specs, or what is it?
They've just got you've tweaked it in some ways. So the design itself is still the same. So there's nothing different really.
It's a good design. I mean, it's very copycat, right? But
it's copycat, but I think it's a good copycat.
Yes,
it's not necessarily a bad thing if you do it properly. I still don't like the big logo on the back. I think they should have stuck to the old style before they put the writing on it, but that's preferential.
I do agree with you, actually. Yeah.
You still got the recessed webcam, which still looks up your chin when you're using it. You've got the...
It's a bit weird.
Yeah. You've still got the fingerprint sensor on it that's integrated in the power button as well. It's still got the same ports and stuff, same sound system. But I think a couple of things that's different is, for example, the touchpad as a free touch, they call it, which is meant to be like the Apple's...
haptics. So it doesn't actually physically click, right?
That's what it's meant to be. But for me, I didn't really feel any difference. If that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. Because I suppose their aim is to create it in a way that it feels like your usual trackpad. So that's fine.
And Apple achieved that. I don't know if you were there when they switched. But
yeah.
I couldn't tell. Like, I got my first MacBook with it was the 12-inch MacBook, and it was uncanny. I was like, I had to turn it off
to see when it goes
to
dead.
actually touch it and to realize, oh my God, there's no clicky.
Yeah.
But when it was on, you couldn't tell.
Right. Yeah. When you put it that way, I think Huawei's done a good job with it. So that's good. And then one thing that really irked me was they've moved away from NVIDIA chips for graphics. They've used Intel Xe, Iris Xe graphics in there, which before I was able to squeeze through, say, Forza Horizon 4 on the previous version. But this one wouldn't even load. Like, it just spins out and it crashes. So I think you still be able to edit videos, like HD videos in Premiere on it. No problem. But
that's a step backwards.
That's as far as it goes.
That was one of the things that made that laptop so incredible.
Right.
Was the discrete graphics, right?
Yeah, that's it. And
I mean, they weren't top-notch discrete graphics, but they were still discrete graphics.
Yeah, it was really good. The previous edition, I remember putting a video up, and it was me playing Forza on it, and a few people were asking me that, wow, is it actually playing Forza? And I was like, yeah, like, comfortably. But now you can't do anything. And then I pushed it. I tried to play Cyberpunk. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I thought, let me just see what it does. And it came up saying it's flatlined. I was like, oh, that's a new one.
So what gen is this? A 11th gen Intel or what is it?
11th gen i7 processor.
So at least they went for pretty much the best mobile processor they have today, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think
the graphics.
Yeah. I think overall as a package is really good. Like it's a good laptop.
What's the price point? Is it similar to the previous or is it cheaper?
That's a good question. This is £1,599 in the UK. I can't remember how much the previous one was. I feel like the previous was like $1,499 or something like that. So maybe this is
very similar.
Yeah, so around about the same. Just slightly more, but yeah.
I mean, I don't see them changing the pricing too much, honestly.
No.
Right? I mean, that wouldn't make much sense.
Well, you do get decent package for that price. It's 16 gig RAM and 1 terabyte SSD storage in there. And Huawei are quite good with bundling other things with it as well. So I think I'm looking on the website right now. You got free gifts that you can pick, like Huawei Sound X Black. You can pick a backpack. You got Bluetooth mouse that you can pick with it as well. Or you can bundle it up with like the FreeBuds Pro. Or I didn't know.
Of course.
So when I was looking at this, I found out that Huawei actually did external displays as well, which is quite interesting.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't know it until I was looking at this. Looking at the bundle that you can get. They do a full HD display, external display that you can get, a 23.8 inch display that you can buy.
Amazing. You know, I like Huawei products a lot. I have a lot of them, but it's because I'm a journalist and they send me stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in a different place than I am. Obviously, in the US, we don't have a lot of Huawei devices in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of them are sold. The laptops are sold. The fitness bands are sold. But how is it in the UK? Have you actually seen a Huawei laptop in the wild yet?
That's a great question. Actually, no. I've never seen anyone use a Huawei laptop apart from another media.
Exactly. I was going to say, apart from us, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, actually. Yeah.
I mean, it's sad, I feel, because they're such good laptops.
Yeah, they're great. John, who you've met, he uses the MateBook 13, I think, not even a Pro. Like he uses that. Wow. He uses that every day. Yeah.
Cool. Well, okay. I wanted to talk about it simply because, I'm going to link your video in the show notes.
Thank you.
You made this great video. So, I was like, look, we're going to talk about laptops. I think we can only talk about Samsung laptops for so long before we run out of things to talk about. Yeah. So let's add some filler, but some good filler. Like, I don't know. I think I wouldn't be surprised if, even though my audience is tech savvy, that some of them don't know that Huawei makes laptops.
Yeah, great laptops too.
So, yeah, and they also had the Huawei MateBook X non-Pro, and I have one of those, but I think that one is from 2018, the year before, I think.
Before, the
one we got at MWC.
Yeah, that rings bells. Yeah, I don't.
It's interesting because it's not that much smaller, but of course it doesn't have the same. It doesn't have discrete graphics.
No.
And it has a traditional standard webcam, which in a way is better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I don't think I've ever used. They have another series. I think they're just called MateBook, not X, and I think those are the cheaper ones.
Yeah. So they do MateBook 13, which I said John's using, but that one's $899. So you say you say it's cheap, but you actually get decent processor in there. You get 10th gen i7, you get MX50 GeForce.
Cheaper than the Pros is what I'm saying.
Yeah, cheaper. Oh, right, gotcha. Yeah, it's cheaper than the Pro. Way much cheaper. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so in terms of other news, we have a bunch of phone news to talk about.
Yeah.
But before we jump into it's a bunch of India and China news. It's actually very interesting because it's another one of those Xiaomi is ruling the world kind of topics.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really, actually maybe this is topical because we just talked about Huawei and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you feel that as Huawei is struggling with, the restrictions that the US is imposing on it for chips and all that, do you feel that Xiaomi is just kind of eating their lunch, like basically trying to become the next Huawei when it comes to phones? Because it feels like that to me. I don't know what it's like with you and PR for Xiaomi in the UK, but PR for Xiaomi here, they are flooding creators, podcasters, journalists with devices right now. Like pretty much I can get anything in their portfolio by just lifting my finger right now.
Yeah, it's the same. It's more or less the same here. Every device that comes out, they reach out to say, do you want to review this? Do you want to review that? So yeah, there's a new device.
Every week it feels
like.
Yeah,
what feels like every other week there's another phone.
They just sent me a Mi 11i.
Right.
And you know how good Xiaomi is at part spinning, right? You know how mixing and matching parts from different things. The Mi 11i is the same as the Poco F3.
Gotcha.
But with a Snapdragon 888 and a 108 megapixel camera.
Interesting.
Same chassis, same camera pod, same size, same battery. Everything is identical except you get, instead of an 870, you get an 888. And instead of a 48 megapixel camera, you get a 108.
Right.
It's crazy. And they say that you want one. Tommy, I can't say no to these things. Like, I have terrible impulse control. So I said yes, and says, now I have yet another Xiaomi phone that's just a variation on the Poco F3 I've been using for a few weeks. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I like some of their phones. I think the M.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah, the Mi Ultra 11. I had a go on it not too long ago, and it feels solid. It feels like a proper premium device.
It's amazing.
It's got some shortcomings here and there, like it gets really hot, and
it does.
The user interface is still not there in terms of even when you go into camera.
But that's MIUI is an acquired taste. It's not my thing.
Yeah. Like when you go into camera settings and you're trying to use the screen on the back, there's no simple way of doing it, and you can only shoot on that with in certain mode and stuff like that. And I was just like, they need to refine that, because a lot of people that are using that would want a very smooth way of just tapping a button and flipping it over and it's there. You know, like you do on the
right.
Z
It's
Fold
hidden
2.
in the menus, right?
Yeah.
You don't even know where to go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think hardware, it shows that they've just mixed and matched different things, and then try to make their software patch it all together into one
But
thing.
I've been using their phones for a while now, and I would say the last 2 years, MIUI has completely drastically improved. Do you remember when the quick settings were at the bottom and you had to swipe up like the iPhone?
Yeah, I do. That's
I mean, that's not that long ago.
That's when they were still copying Apple.
I know, and then they're finally coming to their senses, and I have a feeling that give them another year, and they're going to be a lot more like Samsung, and Samsung itself is a lot closer to Oxygen OS, which is a lot closer to Google Pixel, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we're getting there. I want to give them credit though for improving drastically, but the hardware has always been on point.
Yeah.
And I just actually a couple of hours before we recorded this podcast, finally published my Mi 11 Ultra unboxing video on my YouTube, and I'll link it in the show notes. And I've been using that phone since early April, and It's incredibly good. As you said, it does get a bit warm, especially if you're gaming. And also, I have to say that Xiaomi's imaging expertise has gotten extremely good over the years.
Yeah. But
I feel that on the Mi 11 Ultra, they still need some fine tuning. I was expecting more of that GN2 50 megapixel sensor. It's good, but I felt like with the size of the pixels and the size of the sensor and all that, I was hoping for even better. Like I was thinking more in line with the Huawei P40 Pro Plus or P40 Pro, for low light.
Yeah.
But because it's RGB, it's not RYYB, I think it just can't compete.
Right. I think with things like that though, is you have the hardware that's capable of doing all sorts, and then I think if you're not Google or Huawei, who spends a lot of time refining the processing part of it, then you can tell straight away as soon as you start taking pictures with them, because you're like, well, this is 50 megapixel, but it doesn't feel like a 50 megapixel right now. What's happening?
Yeah. No, for me, it was more like, I was expecting just better low light performance.
Yeah.
Because of the size of the sensor.
Yeah.
I mean, everything else about it, I think that having two 48 megapixel sensors, especially Sony IMX586, which is a very well-known and well-tuned sensor now, as the telephoto and the ultrawide, that pays off, you can tell.
Yeah.
But I've seen the results of what, like, say, the Vivo X60 Pro Plus can do with the GN2 sensor, and I feel that they're doing a better job than Xiaomi is.
Right.
So, I still think a bit of fine tuning there.
Yeah, yeah.
But it did take what, 2 generations before Samsung themselves were as able to master the 108 megapixel sensor, right?
Yeah.
The S20 Ultra last year wasn't that great.
It was awful.
And then the Note 20 Ultra finally fixed a lot of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, it's all in the software, and once you can refine it and actually learn from what people are telling you, and actually this is why Pixel phones do really great, because they use Google Photos to feed the algorithms,
Exactly,
to know what people are taking, to know what good photos look like, so they can do that, listening to people without asking. But Samsung could do that because people like us are constantly telling them what they should be doing. So it looks like they're finally listening. So that's good.
It's sneaky, but it's great. I mean, the end result, like machine learning only works when you can feed it data, right? That's where Google wins,
yeah,
right?
That's it.
For sure. And I think Apple has an edge there too, because they have iCloud.
Yeah.
And people store their photos in iCloud a lot.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but since we started talking about Xiaomi, I want to talk quickly about this Redmi K40 Gaming Edition.
Yeah.
It's China only right now.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because it's kind of like a mid-range price gaming phone with a MediaTek Dimensity 1200. So think of the Redmi K40, which is a Snapdragon 870 powered phone. Think of that, but now think of that as a gaming phone with a MediaTek Dimensity 1200. That's basically what they did.
Yeah, yeah. And I think props to MediaTek. I think just like Xiaomi is going hard right now, trying to release phones and stuff like that. I feel like MediaTek have just come out of the woodworks and said, look, we actually make processing chips, even though they've been making it for like how many years, but no one knew about them. But I feel like now they've doubled down on making loads of different processors. And I think you were there in San Francisco and you can tell that these guys are serious about what they're doing.
Yep.
And I think the Dimensity 1200 is actually a really good processor.
Yeah, I agree.
So
for sure.
they've picked the right partner in this sense, because these guys can actually work with them and tweak on both sides. So Xiaomi can tweak software side, MediaTek can improve on what they learn from this for the next chipset. But I think this Redmi K40 is actually a really good package. 120 hertz refresh rate, really.
And the price, $309 for the base model.
Ridiculous. A ridiculous price. You can see where they've sort of compromised a little bit. Like you've got Full HD Plus display. It's a Gorilla Glass 5 screen. Glass on the front. Trying to think what else.
It's 120 hertz, which is nice.
Yeah. What's the touch sampling rate? Do we know?
480
which
hertz
is
touch response.
That's a lot. But you can tell this is geared towards that gaming. Definitely a gaming device, even down to them having a JBL
67 watt fast charging. They only have that on the Mi 11 Ultra right now.
There you go. So it's got everything for gaming. So the GPU's there, which is the latest G77 MC9. You've got big battery, fast charging. You've got JBL tuned stereo speakers, so they care about sound as well. So the area that I know that this will fail really with the camera. But that's not who it's aimed at.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it depends, because again, Xiaomi has gotten pretty good at imaging lately, and if it's the same 64 megapixel we saw, say, on the Poco X3 NFC or some of the Xiaomi the Mi 10 series phones last year, it's actually not a bad setup. I mean, it's not going to be great, but it's going to be good enough. I think it's going to definitely be like just below the flagships in terms of imaging, Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say, I agree. You'll still take good pictures that you can save and share on social media if you wish to do so. Hence why I was saying, like, for the price point and people that is aimed at, that's more than enough, I think. They'll be fine. But
you know what's got me the most excited about this phone? Some of the colors, like the yellow, is really cool. But the triggers on it are mechanically, they pop out. So there's little sliders.
Right.
And you slide them and they unlatch these buttons that raise. I'm pretty sure it's purely mechanical. There's no electric motor like on the Legion, the what is it called? The Lenovo gaming phones where the triggers lift out. This is the same idea, but it's purely spring loaded, right? Like you slide the little thing and thing pops out and
that's
you have
amazing.
A clicky click.
Yeah.
And I think this must be like fidget spinner satisfying to click these things open,
Yeah. Also, once you go shoulder buttons on a phone for gaming, nothing else competes. Like you're gonna get on any other phone, and you feel the difference.
It's going to feel like a lag, especially if they're physically clickable buttons.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I feel like some, Red Magic has the capacitive ones, and I think it's okay, but it doesn't ever feel quite right.
No, it doesn't give you the same satisfaction. Absolutely not.
No. What's Asus doing with the ROG phone now? Is it physical now, or do they still do capacitive?
I'm not sure because I've never. Fun fact: I've never used any ROG phones at all.
I only got the first one, and then they haven't sent me anything since then. Probably because I didn't like it enough or something.
Right. I went to their launch event for the first one, I think, but then I followed up with, can I have one to review? But I'm still waiting till today.
That's exactly what happened with me. I asked for the second one. They were never able to send me one. Then it became irrelevant. And then the third one, I didn't even bother because I was like, look, I mean, it's cool. But then the 5 came out, which is the fourth one.
Yeah.
And I just was like, nah, I don't have time. Like, I can't do all the phones,
No, that's where I'm at with phones. There's so many phones right now. I have to pick wisely. I have to pick and choose the ones that I think I want to. Like even the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra, I wanted to review that, but they took so long that by the time they said, "Oh, we've got one, but it's not even in the box," I was like, "Well, nah, it's okay. It's a bit too late for my audience now. They've seen it all."
Yeah, that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
I still like to get my hands on them because it gives me a point of reference.
Yeah.
And I was very clear with them. I say, look, I'm not sure I'll be able to actually create content around this, but I'd love to try it out to get a perspective on it.
Yeah.
And usually smart PR people are okay with that.
Right. I was going to say, what was the reply? Because the problem here is if I get that phone in based on the same thing as a point of reference, they'll be expecting a review from it, which... Yeah, I guess,
having been a journalist for a long time and having, I used to work at Engadget, and, I'm always very transparent with my PR contacts about my intentions when I request reviewing it. Like if I know for sure I'm going to be reviewing it, I will tell them. If I think it might get some mention in the podcast, then I'm telling them that, right? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
And they can decide on their own what they want to do. But I think smart PR people, assuming they have availability of devices, will send them to you anyway because they know that it's a long tail game, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of like, if I can get the Mi 11 Ultra, which I did, even if I didn't get it in time, I didn't get it in time. But it's nice because now I have a point of reference. I know how it competes, how it places versus the S21 Ultra versus the P40 Pro Plus.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so for me, it's, as somebody really passionate about imaging, it's really important, even though it's hard for me to justify a review right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because timing.
Yeah.
But I still am glad they sent me one because I'm still putting some photos on Instagram and I'm still like, talking about it with you right now on the podcast. So I think, some PR people don't see the benefit. And I'm like, okay. And some others are just like, all right, you'll send it to you anyway. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And Xiaomi is very generous. As I said, I think they're really trying to get themselves out there.
Yeah.
And, and that's kind of why I feel they're trying to take over the role of Huawei. And I think Huawei used to be super generous on devices as well. They still are. But my point is that, for a while, that's how they got our attention in the US, especially the media. By being like, hey, we exist. You want the latest? And we'd say yes. And then they would send us a P40 Pro Plus and we'd be like, my God, this phone is incredible, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They're getting there.
Interesting.
They're getting there. I think more people know about the name Xiaomi now. So, especially in this region. So, it's working.
So, remember how we talked about part spinning earlier? Okay,
yeah.
This is the thing about Xiaomi that's crazy. Xiaomi just launched 2 phones in India alongside the Mi 11 Ultra.
Yeah.
The Mi 11 Ultra for India is exactly the same as the Mi 11 Ultra for global or UK, I mean, because there's no US model. But they launched 2 specialized quote-unquote phones for India, the Mi 11X and the Mi 11X Pro.
Right.
And guess what those 2 phones are identical to? In every way. Specs, design. The 11X is identical to the Poco F3.
I was going to say, yeah.
And the 11X Pro is identical to the Mi 11i that I'd mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Basically the Poco F3 with a 888 chip and a 108 megapixel sensor.
Yeah.
So this is the crazy thing about Xiaomi. It's like there's so much overlap of everything,
Yeah. I think
it's mad.
I don't know, and I think they don't care because they just want you to have
their
brand
they don't care.
in your hand. That's the main thing. And they've packed it with such high spec as well. I think with Snapdragon 888 in there, like that's just top of the line spec in a phone that doesn't cost much.
The only thing that distinguishes this phone, the Mi 11i or the Mi 11X Pro in India, with say the Mi 11, the normal flagship, is OIS on the camera and wireless charging. That's the only two differences.
Gotcha.
Maybe there's one more difference: the 33-watt charging.
Yes.
Versus 50-watt charging.
And then maybe like the IP rating and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, ironically, the Mi 11 isn't IP rated, and the Mi 11i is IP53.
53, yeah. And then they use Gorilla Glass 5, and I think it's a good package. And the Mi 11X Pro has the 108 megapixel Samsung HM2 sensor, which is the same one in the Realme phone. I think it was Realme 8 Pro that I reviewed not too long ago, and that performed really well in terms of resolution. I actually compared it to the S21 Ultra, and a lot of people just didn't believe it. Like, unfortunately, it was a sponsored content, which made people thought actually, wait, this is lies. I was like, no, I've uploaded them to Flickr. If you want to check the EXIF data and check it out yourself, Pixel Peak, help yourself. But the 108 megapixel HM2 on there is incredible.
It's been my experience as well, to be honest. For me, I have the Realme 8 Pro as well, but the one that really impressed me is the Redmi Note 10 Pro.
Right. I haven't used that one.
Which also has the Samsung HM2 in it.
Okay.
And I just reviewed that for geekspin.co. By the time the podcast is actually live, it will be probably on Geekspin. So check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes if it's up. That phone is basically 80% of a Mi 11 for 1/3 of the price.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's got 120 hertz AMOLED, 1080p. It's got the 108 megapixel HM2 from Samsung without OIS, but still. It has the same macro, 5 megapixel autofocus super macro as the Mi 11. It has 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 33 watt charging, headphone jack with a really good DAC, stereo speakers. Even though they're not Harman Kardon branded, they sound pretty much identical to Mi 11. And the whole thing costs $280. Now you're going to say, what did they cut out? Well, they cut out wireless charging, they cut out OIS on the main lens, and they cut out the processor. It's not a Snapdragon 888. It's a lowly Snapdragon 732G 4G chip. But nonetheless, you gain a couple of things. You gain a headphone jack and you gain an SD card slot. I think for that price, I just can't think of a phone that has better specs.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, no.
Like the Realme 8 Pro came very close.
Yeah.
But the Realme 8 Pro doesn't have 120 hertz refresh rate.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think right now, if you want an affordable phone that really kicks ass, the Redmi Note 10 Pro, in India it's called the Redmi Note 10 Pro Plus, is hard to beat. I really don't think you can do better than that.
Yeah. What I do wonder though with all these releases and stuff is software updates and security patches. How long you love those for? Because these guys are releasing these phones. So it's like I don't even know what analogy to use, but they're just flooding the market with so many devices that you start to worry that where is it going to go wrong?
Well, I mean, that's the challenge, right? For me, I mean, I obviously keep my phones for a very short time, so I don't really have to worry about that. But I do know that it matters, and I do try to care as much as I can. I think Xiaomi's gotten a little better with their updates, but it's not like OnePlus or even Samsung or Google, where you know you're going to get 2 years, 2 Android versions, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, Xiaomi's doing some good things. There's no doubt about it. It's very impressive, frankly. But you know who's kind of learning from Xiaomi, and it's kind of surprising me how the strategy's been changing? So it's probably a different perspective for you in the UK, but in the US, your Moto obviously is a well-known brand, being originally an American brand, now owned by Lenovo, Motorola. The G series in this country is very popular, and especially in prepaid. And you probably know that the G series is also very popular in South America. I think that in Europe, you also have a bunch of G series now.
Yeah, Motorola used to be popular here years ago with their flip phones and stuff. But I think right now they're not as popular as it might be in the US. It's not a big deal here as such, because one thing I've learned about Motorola devices here is, for me anyway, every time I've used one, is the spec doesn't match up with the experience that you get on it.
Right.
So I think I had a phone that came the other day for an event they were doing, and as soon as I switched it on, it was just laggy. Like photo app was laggy. Trying to take low light photography was just like using a potato to take a photo.
Oh, their cameras are always crap.
So I was just so disappointed that when the PR asked if I wanted to keep you for longer to review or anything, I was just like, no, like pick it up. But yeah, for me, they always have these good specs. Like I think the one you're going to talk about, the G60 and the G40 Fusion. Yeah. They have large battery life,
Well, so I think this is what's interesting to me is like, until now, the G series here in the US was always like underachieving, I felt. Like, it was a very affordably priced, but it didn't try very hard to deliver much for the price. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like you'd see a phone costing $300 and it had a 60 hertz display and a mediocre camera and not enough RAM and, full plastic build. And then you look at what Xiaomi's doing, which is the opposite end, right? That the Redmi Note 10 Pro I just talked about and raved about, and I'm not expecting Moto to be able to quite meet Xiaomi here, but I think they're learning that to be competitive, at least in India, they have to be spec monsters on paper and actually deliver a good experience. And I think the G60 and the G40 Fusion, I think this is a turning point. If you look at the specs and the price, they're going after Xiaomi.
Yeah. But I think, like I said, for me, I'd need to use it to confirm whether this is actually worth the price or even not even the pricing yet, is the experience using it. Because
is it any good?
Yeah, because for me, every time I've used a Motorola device, yes, they can shout about 6,000 milliamp hour battery, 102 megapixel, 8 megapixel sensor, etc. But it's the user experience. Does it actually match up to those things that's in the hardware in terms of software and everything else? So that's.
But it is interesting that they're actually giving the specs now that are competitive, because until like this phone 2 months ago would have had a 60 hertz display and a 48 megapixel camera.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? For the same price.
The same price, yeah.
So I think they're learning from Realme and Redmi to really deliver on the specs, since India is so spec sensitive.
Yeah,
right?
they are.
So now hopefully they can actually follow through with this being a decent phone.
Yeah. I think for them, also, their devices is always a phone that I'd buy for my mum, because she doesn't care about the all singing and dancing. She's patient enough to wait for a lag, or for her, she hasn't used an S21 Ultra to then go, this doesn't feel the same. Do you know what I mean? So this is something that I would buy for her.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so they look very similar. The 120 hertz display. I think those are LCDs though. Big batteries, as you said, 6,000. Snapdragon 1732G. 108 megapixel HM2 on the G60 and a 64 megapixel on the G40 Fusion. And that's essentially it. The pricing is very aggressive, and that's very interesting because, again, Motorola has always kind of underachieved in that sense. This is India, of course. Yeah. But in the US, they've always been a little too pricey, in my opinion, for what they delivered.
Right.
Even when they delivered a decent experience, because unlike you, my experience with Moto phones for the US, the G series, is that they're not bad. They're a good user experience, primarily because they're very stock in their Android, and they're smooth enough. It's just that they lack the kind of spec sheet you expect at that price point when you compare it to OnePlus or anything else. But Moto has also learned to diversify their offerings on a per market basis. So, they might be just aiming this purely at India. We'll never see these anywhere else.
Yeah. And they're going into India, where there's Xiaomi who's dominating. Well,
they have to be competitive. Yeah, exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how the performance turn out to be.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the last thing we want to talk about today real quick is some of these Google Pixel 5a leaks that have been coming.
Yes.
So Google I/O is coming up. I've been invited. I got my press pass. I mean, it's a virtual event. Doesn't matter. But I'm looking forward to it, mostly because they always traditionally announce some sort of Pixel phone. Now, last year, COVID made things difficult, and we didn't get the Pixel 4a until August or whatever, July.
Okay.
So, it was delayed a bit. But Google works in mysterious ways, and I do not want to predict what's going to happen. But I would love, my ideal would be that they launch a Pixel 5a like soon for I/O maybe.
Yeah.
Because the Pixel 4a and 4a 5G last year were some of my favorite phones,
Yeah, I think the A series for me is always, even though it's meant to be like the budget version of the previous one. So like, 4A is like it's meant to be like a budget Pixel 4, for example. 5A is meant to be a budget Pixel 5. But I think when you hold it in hand and you actually use it, for me, I always feel like I'm still using a high-end phone because the performance are always good for some reason. I don't know what sorcery Google does to their phones, but
it's amazing,
they
isn't it?
just work really well. Because I remember using the Pixel 4a and I was like, if this thing had a bigger memory, this would be my daily phone to actually use. But every time I used it, it just ran out of memory. So I was like, okay, gotta go back to another phone. But no, they're really, really good devices. And I'm looking forward to seeing them bring it out. And I'm also looking forward to what software updates they're going to be doing, because I think Google's software first for me. Because whatever they put on there will dictate what other manufacturers will be doing in the near future as well.
Yeah. So the latest rumors, so we know obviously Google has confirmed that there's a 5A, it exists, but they didn't specify when it's coming. I'd like to see them come at I/O or it, because it's probably just one phone this year.
Yeah.
And, it's clearly going to be a 5G phone. It's clearly going to have a Snapdragon 765G again, which is a pretty solid chip to have.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm not worried about that. Even if the cameras stay the same, in my ideal dream world,
right,
I would love to see an affordable Pixel, like an A series Pixel with wireless charging. Like, I don't care about water resistance, but wireless charging. Just if the 4A 5G, last year's 4A 5G, had wireless charging, I think I might have switched that to my main phone.
Interesting.
Because for me, the Pixel 5 is too small. So it's kind of crazy for me to say that, but I'm so used to wireless charging now for my own main phone that I can't live without it.
I love the Pixel 5 size though. I think it's just I still use mine a lot.
Is that your main phone?
It's I don't have a main phone. I've multiple devices.
No, I know we're all in the same boat. But if you had to have a main phone, would that be your main phone?
Yeah. Again, it's memory size for me. It just runs out.
It's funny because I guess, I came from a Pixel 4 XL. So I went from a Pixel 3, well, I've done them all, right? But I always had the XL. So I had a Pixel XL, Pixel 2 XL, Pixel 3 XL, Pixel 4 XL. And then I was like, I want a Pixel 5 XL. And there wasn't.
Yeah,
and the Pixel 4a 5G is the XL. It's the bigger one.
Yeah.
But doesn't have 90 hertz, doesn't have as much RAM, as we all know, doesn't have wireless charging.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, the rumors here say that it's going to be 6.2 inch, so it's not going to be that big.
No, yeah.
So you're going to be happy.
Yeah. I love the size of that phone. But one thing I know is, like, Google, I believe anyway, they release products based on data. So
yes,
if they decided to cut out a bigger size device, it's probably because they know based on their data that people prefer a smaller device. You see what I mean?
True, but in the past they even did a 3A and a 3A XL. Remember?
Yeah. But that's the beginning. So the more they feed their data, the more they look at the data, and analyze them, the more they know what their customers want. That's one thing I know about Google. That's why. But I think in our bubble, we tend to be in this bubble where we think this is what we want and this is what everyone wants. So that's our problem in a way, double-edged sword. But I believe that Google, they do it for that reason, because they looked at the data and that's what they want. Look how long it took them to introduce ultra-wide angle lens after
for sure,
debating for so long to say customers don't use wide angle lens or something, and then they changed that tune because Google Photos is full of ultra wide angle photos from other manufacturers.
Yeah, it's interesting because my biggest gripe about the Pixel 4 and 4 XL with the telephoto was that the telephoto's color science did not at all match the main camera.
Yeah.
And that was a problem for me because usually I do a lot of my product photography, like product shots for Instagram and for my reviews, my written reviews for the various publications I write for. I use Pixel phones for my photos.
Amazing.
I've been writing about phones since 2005, and from the get-go, I decided early on if I was going to be a mobile reporter, to use mobile devices for the photography. So I went through all the pain of really bad low light and stuff back in the day, or lack of autofocus, and eventually graduated to a point where now, all phones are pretty great for photography. But it still has its challenges. And one of the challenges is sometimes I want to do a close-up shot, right? And so on the Pixel 4 XL, it was great. There was a telephoto. But every time I would take it in the same setting, I would get completely different color temperature. Like the white balance would be completely different. And so then I have to go, and edit the photos, right? And the other thing that I really wish Google would do on the Pixel camera app, they used to have this feature, but they used to have a setting to manually set the white balance.
Gotcha, like a pro mode.
Right. And now I don't have that anymore. And yes, there are third-party apps I can install, but third-party app for cameras on Android, as you know, do not take advantage of all the computational stuff and whatever, right? They just don't work that well. So for me, right now, I'm using primarily a 4A 5G as my phone to take photos of other phones. And when I want to zoom in, I just use the 2x. Like I'm using a digital zoom on purpose, and I accept the loss of quality because I get the same color temperature. I get the match of the previous photo I took, very closely.
Yeah. I hear you.
Like basically, I'm controlling my white balance right now by controlling my environment lighting, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
And it works because if you are shooting in the same direction with the same kind of lighting, you get roughly the same white balance, and it all works out. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah.
But if you are shooting with two lenses that are radically different color science, like the Pixel 4 XL used to, even though it had a physically better telephoto, right? Because it was optical, I was just so much work to edit it. And fix it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm with you there. But
it's interesting.
I think the key thing there for me would be, again, wireless charging would be nice to have, because just my ecosystem at home is set up to have wireless charging all over the place. I absolutely love wireless charging. And I also miss micro SD card expansion. I know that's far ahead. That's
well, no
too
Pixel
late.
Has ever had that.
That's
so
that's never going to happen. But that would be on my ideal wish list kind of thing. But I also wish they improved the audio, the sound that comes out of them, because I don't think they're that good.
It's basic. It's stereo. At least it's stereo, but it's not that great.
No. Considering they make good speaker systems in terms of Google Home Hub and stuff like that, they sound really good. You'd expect their phones to have a really good sound system as well. And Pixel Buds is actually one of my favorite.
They sound very good.
In-ear headphones. I would have thought their phones would have a good sound quality as well. But it's very teeny. Sounds like.
I mean, I think you might want to wish that for the Pixel 6 because I think the 5A is probably going to be cutting some corners somewhere.
Yeah.
But this is something I'm glad you're touching on this, the wireless charging thing, because for me, this is the feature that I do not understand why manufacturers consider this to be a premium feature.
Yeah.
Like I understand that it is more expensive to add, and on a budget device, you have to make decisions about what gets cut out. I get that. And in that sense, I understand why they don't put wireless charging. But I want a change of behavior to exist in the phone world where wireless charging becomes commonplace, even in the mid-range, even in the low budget range. I would love to see that more prevalent, and I want one of the manufacturers to start this. Like Samsung really has driven wireless charging hard in the flagship segment, and now it's become very commonplace. But look at how resistant OnePlus was for the longest time, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And it's interesting that you say that as a premium feature, because right at the moment we're seeing a lot of 120 hertz refresh rate on displays,
exactly,
even on a £120 phone. So you're like, if that's not seen as a premium feature, then it doesn't make sense that wireless, they should be on the same playing field, right? So wireless,
absolutely, and that's why I want to see more wireless charging on affordable phones, just because, Like I can live without an IP rating, and I can live without a headphone jack. I mean, it's not ideal. I still like wired audio a lot, but I can live without it. There's adapters and stuff. But I feel like wireless charging is really impossible to add. Like you just can't, nobody does even if you can somehow build like you'd have to build a case, like the Mophie cases for the iPhone
adds extra,
that has like a coil in it, and then it becomes bulky and ugly and terrible.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, it's just such a small thing. It's not that expensive. It could be a differentiator in the same way as you said, 120 hertz and 108 megapixel HM2 sensors are. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll have to speak to someone who can tell us how much it costs.
If somebody could pull it off, it would be Google, because it would be so Google-like to just say, we're going to put wireless charging on an affordable phone.
Yeah. It would be interesting to speak to someone who can tell us how much it actually costs them as a manufacturer to put wireless charging in there, 120 hertz refresh, and what else are they all using these days? 108 megapixel.
High megapixel cameras.
Yeah. How much did those things cost? And
fast charging.
So fast charging, again, I wish every manufacturer have. It doesn't have to be ridiculous like Huawei's top end one.
33 is my sweet spot. Give us 30 or 33 watts.
Yeah, I want a 15 minutes charge. Should give me enough to last me the day. I'm not worried.
Yep, exactly.
So
100%. So let's see what happens with that. I feel like maybe Google will surprise us, because they were early adopters of wireless charging.
Yeah.
The Nexus 4 had wireless charging.
Yeah.
So, do you remember back when Nokia was doing Windows phones still?
Yeah.
Almost every Nokia phone that time, whether there was a flagship or a mid-ranger, had wireless charging.
It's crazy.
It's crazy that here we are 10 years later and it's still not popular.
Yeah. I always think like Nokia were ahead of its time in terms of the product, even down to those tablet devices they were making back then, the 10, 1520 and 1320, I think it was. If you remember those, when we went to Dubai. If you at Abu
you were
Dhabi,
there, right?
When they launched those devices.
Oh my God, that was such a great event.
And I used to think these devices are amazing. If they were to launch that now, those portfolio now, obviously make them slicker and updated camera hardware and stuff and Android on it. They would have been fine. But yeah, it's just a shame. Those were great devices. Even down to we were talking about this AirTag. How Nokia did their tracking device back in the day.
Back then.
And that was not even a big deal. It was just an accessory. It was just in case. There you go. We make this as well. Yeah, they were ahead of their time.
Oh man, I remember Nokia World in Abu Dhabi. That was so good.
That was an amazing trip.
Wow. Well, listen, we should wrap it up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, Tommy?
Absolutely. You can find me at GadgetsBoy, so GadgetsBoy, on every platform. Yeah,
you should subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff. You have some great content, and hopefully the folks that are listening here, if they don't know and don't follow you already, will follow you after this.
Thank you.
I really enjoy your content.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL on Twitter and on Instagram, as you know. It's like the comic book character Tankgirl, but without the vowels. And if you want to comment on this podcast, talk to Tommy and I, just go on Twitter. And if you want to look at pretty pictures taken with phones and pretty pictures of phones, go to my Instagram. And then, there's a couple of YouTube channels that go along with this podcast. There's youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast, which is the main channel, has all the unboxing videos and sometimes reviews and sometimes hands-ons. Although with the pandemic, we haven't really had that many hands-ons. But check it out. It's some visual content to go alongside the audio of this podcast. And then there is a new channel that my producer and I have been working on, trying home automation, travel, gadgets, things that are peripheral to the mobile world. So we're just starting there and we need some more subscribers. So youtube.com/mobiletechmore. Just go subscribe so we can get monetized, and we've got a whole bunch of content in the pipe. So stay tuned for that. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. If you want to subscribe, that would be wonderful. We're on all the big platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. If you use a podcast app that lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that for discoverability. It really helps. And there's a donate link in the show notes. If you can help financially, go for it. It is a PayPal button. It's pretty straightforward. Just follow the link. And then finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible has been with us since the early days of the show, and they're a wonderful sponsor. They have a great deal for you. If you don't have Audible yet and you want to get it, you get a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a free book at the end, whether you stay or not. And the offer is at audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. If you're not familiar with Audible, they are the premier, number one, awesomest audiobook platform in the planet. They have an incredible selection of books. Some of them are read by the authors, which I really like. And then, it's like, if you like reading as much as I do, if you're like a bookworm, it's like reading without having to use your eyes. It's just like you can close your eyes and listen and you get the same experience. It's the same epic long thing as reading a book. You can put it down after an hour or two and then get back to it later. It's totally awesome. So check out Audible. They're wonderful. You can help them and help us at the same time. audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And Tomi, thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll definitely have you on again at some point. And folks, we'll have another show next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.